Hey, listen!
Welcome everyone, this is On This Restart, and this time we're going to be talking about Xenoblade Chronicles 3 and that story DLC, that quick Wave 4 teaser Nintendo gave us in the most recent Nintendo Direct. So there's a few different mysteries coming from this quick 30 seconds or so of footage for this story DLC, and that's what we're talking about today. So jumping right into things, let's tackle one of the big questions for this DLC. Is this DLC going to be a prologue story or an epilogue story? So we have two different examples of this with the recent Xenoblade games we've seen on Switch. With Xenoblade Chronicles 2, for its expansion DLC, we had a prologue story, a story that took place before the events of the main game. But then, with Xenoblade Chronicles Definitive Edition, the remaster or remake for Xenoblade Chronicles 1, they included another expansion story that was called Future Connected, that took place after the events of the main game, and there was a lot of elements in Future Connected that were hinting at Xenoblade Chronicles 3. So a few months back, after finishing Xenoblade Chronicles 3, I put out my own video talking about what I think was going to happen. And in the video I talked about how there's definitely a good chance that there would be a prologue story, but I was leaning more towards an epilogue story based off how Xenoblade Chronicles 3 ended. There was a lot suggesting that there was more to come with these characters. That said, it looks like they're going in the direction of a prologue story. Why? Well, let's just take a look at these characters, which, by the way, will bring up some other questions and mysteries. So, the characters we're seeing here. One appears to be Shulk, one appears to be Rex, another appears to be Alvis, and then there's this fourth character, which at first I thought was a more grown-up version of Noah, because both Shulk and Rex look like more grown-up versions of themselves, but upon closer inspection, I think this is definitely someone else. And basically, I believe that we are seeing clear evidence that this is most likely going to be a story of the Founders. And this goes back to what we talked about beforehand. While I wanted it to be an epilogue story because I wanted to see what would happen with the characters after Xenoblade Chronicles 3, there was clearly an emphasis on the importance and history of these characters that were the Founders. Because in the city, there is this room with the 6 different statues with these different explanations. And when we take a look at these characters, well, they match up pretty well with 3 of them in this teaser. Now when you take a look at one of the statues here that's not part of the 3 in the trailer, it does look a lot like younger Shulk, and when you read the description it does talk about how he was a mechanic and all, but he was an actual soldier, and when we go ahead and read this other description for this other character, I think it matches up far more clearly to Shulk. So when taking a look at this statue, he has the longer hair we're seeing of Shulk in the trailer, and we're also seeing the cape as well. This does seem to match up to him a little bit more closely. But it's the description of this character that makes me believe that this is absolutely Shulk. Rather than the Founder herself, this statue depicts the Founder's mentor figure, standing as a sign of the deep reverence and devotion she felt for her teacher. The Founder's master was unconnected to her by bonds of blood, yet he raised her as would befit a child of one's own, it is said. Though of a calm and constant disposition, the sight of him on the battlefield, great red sword in hand, struck fear into many a Mobius. And though the vicious struggle against Mobius cost his ferocious warrior his right arm, the loss did nothing to diminish his desire to hone his martial skills each day, standing as a vivid testament to his indomitable will. So from that description, they talk about this big red sword, and the character traits all seem to match up with Shulk as well. So most likely, I do believe that this is Shulk. It matches up quite well to what we see in the trailer. Someone who looks like Shulk, but older, with his big red Monado blade, the version we saw from Future Connected. But then what about this other guy? Well, it's believed to be Rex. And when we take a look at the statue, it matches up quite well. The clothes, the stature, the hair. Much like with the Founder of Reed, this statue too depicts his Founder's respected mentor rather than the Founder herself. The mentor boasted a robust physique, wielding 2 great swords at once with utmost ease, and facing down Mobius despite the loss of one eye. He lived his life an unsophisticated sort, broad-minded but impassioned, and is said to have aided the Founders in the fight against Mobius, physically and spiritually. He was further reported to have been a free spirit whose qualities influenced the other Founders, still young and impressible when the city was restored. Indelible proof of this rebellious spirit can be seen time and again in the ethos of the house and generations to come. So here this statue shows someone that looks like Rex with 2 powerful blades, and in the trailer we see someone who looks like grown-up Rex with both of the Aegis blades. And unlike the other 4 statues in this room, both Shulk and Rex are talking about how they were mentors for the founders, and not specifically the founders themselves, further hinting that they come from elsewhere, a different origin, which if they are actually Shulk and Rex, that would make sense because they are the main characters from Xenoblade Chronicles 1 and 2, different worlds from Aeonios. And we'll get to Alvis in a moment here, but first let's get to this other character with the ponytail that looks a bit like Noah, but isn't Noah. So at one point I thought it was, but I no longer think this is the case. If you look at the statue, it matches up really well to the character we're seeing in this footage, and that alone I think is already pretty good evidence, but when reading the description it further supports this being an entirely different person. In memory of the founder of House Vandom, the city's restorer and liberator, the original incarnation of the city was once laid to ruin by Mobius N's hand. The founder realized fully the power of the Ouroboros, heretofore limited, and fought against N, ousting him. Once victorious, he gathered the old city's people, scattered to the winds, and re-established the city. With the city restored, he left its government in the hands of the founder of Doyle, and departed on a lonely expedition. No records exist of his fate thereafter. Heirs of Vandom's lineage only returned to the new city several centuries later. Oral tradition has it the founder was master of the classical art of fist fighting, and the scions of House Vandom carry on the custom to this day. Considering everything here, there does appear to be a resemblance between this character and Noah. The blue eyes, the long black hair, them tying it back. It makes sense. We even see some sort of red gauntlet on this character, which at first I thought might have been the gauntlet that Noah wears when he's pulling out Lucky 7. However, we've seen actually 2 different angles of this character, and it seems like he may have the red gauntlet on either hand. And considering this description is saying that he was a master of the classical art of fist fighting, perhaps this person isn't going to be wielding a sword. If these 3 different prominent characters are all going to be a part of the main cast for this DLC story, Rex and Shulk already have big awesome swords. Not everyone needs to have a sword. Make it different. Him being a fist fighter, I'm okay with that. That actually could be really cool. But also, when we take a look at the footage, he's showing what appears to be early signs of an Ouroboros, which this description talks about this character fully realizing the power of the Ouroboros. So the trailer is hinting very clearly that this founder that we saw as a statue is the character we're looking at in the footage. That much seems pretty clear. And maybe the reason he looks like Noah could have something to do with Consul N's kid that at one point he had. What exactly happened to him? Perhaps this character is a descendant of Consul N. That's not a big stretch, I would say. But now let's go back to Alvis. This character seems to share a design with Alvis. It is probably Alvis. Most of us think it's Alvis. But there's a couple interesting things about this. 1. In Xenoblade Chronicles 3, Mobius, you go through 25 different Consul members, all with a particular letter, B through Z or Z. But there isn't one for A. Except maybe now. Maybe Alvis is Consul A. His name does start with A. But what's also interesting about Alvis here is what we see on his chest. It looks a lot like the same Aegis symbol we saw on Pyra, Mithra, Numa, Malos, Logos, however you choose to call him. And all those characters are from Xenoblade Chronicles 2, but Alvis is from Xenoblade Chronicles 1. However, in the story for Xenoblade Chronicles 2, Klaus does tell us that Ontos, Logos, and Numa were 3 cores to the Trinity processor before the big event where the 2 worlds split apart. The world for Xenoblade Chronicles 1 and the world for Xenoblade Chronicles 2. However, we only saw Logos and Numa, Malos, Pyra, Mithra in Xenoblade Chronicles 2. We did not know what happened to Ontos. Well, maybe Ontos is Alvis. Considering what we're seeing with that Aegis symbol, it now seems like pretty close to confirmation that this is the case. But what leads him to becoming a villain, at least based off the way he's being portrayed in the trailer? That is still a mystery. We are unsure. But it might be tied to that Aegis symbol, or perhaps to this big fusion event of the 2 different worlds. And on the note of the world, that's another interesting mystery about this trailer. what's going on exactly? It looks like we're seeing a new area that seems to have elements from Xenoblade Chronicles 1 and perhaps some Xenoblade Chronicles 2 stuff in the background. But if you look carefully, it still looks like the world of Aeonios, because it looks like it's all high up in the air. It's not on the ground or in the sea. There are clouds around. And this would make sense given that it is DLC for Xenoblade Chronicles 3. We should likely will play in an area that we didn't get to play beforehand. If it's going to be done basically like Tour of the Golden Country, a prologue story, which would mean that a big part of the area we explore in the DLC will be an area that no longer exists in the current timeline of the main game. And considering that part of the story for Xenoblade Chronicles 3 is that big chunks of the land are being obliterated out of existence randomly, well, that fact alone could be explanation as to why we don't see this area in the main gameplay for Xenoblade Chronicles 3. But with that all in mind, I find myself quite excited for this DLC. It looks like both Rex and Shulk are coming back, and they are adults, so we're going to get to see them in their more mature forms. We're going to get to see this new character that seems to be at least related to Noah, at least be a part of that lineage, but have a different fighting style, which I think is also going to be fun to see and feel refreshing. We're going to see more story elements connecting Xenoblade Chronicles 1, 2, and 3, and what's going on with Alvis. Bringing him back is definitely going to be a cool play at nostalgia here. And then being able to go back to Aeonios, but with more new land, is also exciting. More epic, giant, vast terrains to explore. I mean, that's one of the big allures for Xenoblade, so that definitely has me excited. But what else is there going to be? Why is Alvis the way he is? What's the connection to this character and potentially Noah, if anything at all? How exactly does Shulk lose his arm? How exactly does Rex lose his eye? Well, we're probably going to find out in this DLC. But what do you guys make of the different mysteries going on with Wave 4 and Xenoblade Chronicles 3? Let me know in the comments below. Anyways, everyone, this is On Just Restart. Thank you so much for listening and watching, and I'll see you all really soon. Take care.